morning. It's a hot day, so I'm going to be pretty brief. We have great speakers for you, and we'll have a brief question-and-answer period afterwards. But before we begin, I just wanted to do a couple quick thank yous. First of all, to the Reserve Officers Association across the street who helped us with staging the event. Also, I wanted to thank the 78th Company of the Marine Corps Reenactors Unit who helped us today as well. And also the Air Force provided Master Sergeant Monty Lyle to provide her wonderful voice this morning. With that, I'll ask Master Sergeant Lyle to come forward for our nation's anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight of the ramparts we watched was so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red cloud of bombs bursting in and gate proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much, Master Sergeant. With that, I would also like to ask for a moment of silence for the 4 million World War I veterans. Thank you. I'd like to introduce to you first, our speaker today will be our chairman of the U.S. World War I Centennial Commission, and that's Mr. Rob Dalessandro.
Thanks, Greg. Well, good morning, everybody. And on behalf of the World War I Centennial Commission, I'd like to thank you for an opportunity to share my thoughts and for your time today and welcome you on behalf of the World War I Centennial Commission. We live under the long shadow of the Great War in so many ways. In the way that it shaped the post-war armistice, framed generally along Wilson's 14 points, in the way that it redrew the map of the world, and in particular the Middle East, and in the way that it shaped our civil rights movement, and in the ensuing years, the way it brought the United States onto the world stage. I could go on. At the Commission, we have an ambitious multi-year program aimed at fostering awareness and educating the American public on the triumphs and on the tragedies of this era. Our goal is to commemorate the legacy of the mothers and fathers, the parents of the greatest generation. This was America's first overseas conflict involving a fighting force of 2 million men and women, the first significant conflict. Fighting on multiple fronts, the American armed forces would distinguish themselves and tip the balance of combat with an additional 75,000 perishing for the Allied cause. It was a high cost. 50,000 died as a direct result of combat. 75,000 non-combat losses. Given the length of our involvement, that was a truly costly war. Many decades have passed since the guns fell silent. The parades and the memorials have become a dim memory in many cases. And before long, the Doughboys themselves and the folks at home became a forgotten generation of Americans. They were a generation that came of age in what seemed like a distant time to us today. Their lives were sold cheaply in some cases, and their notions of idealism to us today seem quite quaint. But they bridged the gap between the Gilded Era and the Jazz Age. They watched the fall of empires in bewildered awe, and they dreadfully witnessed the rise of communism, of fascism, of Nazism, while birthing that greatest generation. They truly opened up what would become an American century. It was they who presided over the inauguration of a violent age that they themselves struggle to comprehend. Today, they beckon us from faded images, extolling their love of family, of home, and of country. On the eve of this centennial, we must not overlook this generation. They shaped the modern world. They underpinned it with the current virtues and depravities. Our world and our generation are yet their legacy. It is our task to ensure that this generation is not forgotten. It is our mission to provide a voice to these Americans who can no longer speak. It is our task to ensure that here in Washington, D.C., there is a national memorial to these great Americans, along with that memorial in Kansas City. I thank you for your attendance here today, to your service to our great endeavor together, and to our nation. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce General Barry McCaffrey, known to many, and a good friend to the World War I Centennial Commission. General McCaffrey's been a great help to us already, and we look forward to a lot of work together in the future. Thank you, Bob.
Let me begin by thanking Congressman Ted Poe for being here and all the work you've done to help put this effort together with others. You know, Senator Jack Reed, Rob Portman, Congressman Cleaver from Kansas City, but Ted, you've been really instrumental. We thank you for helping bring attention on an educational project we think is important to the American people. And Rob, thanks for your leadership, and Ed Fountain and Dan Dayton and the what tiny staff of 5 people who have, along with these magnificent interns, I might add, a lot of college seniors and juniors from the great universities of the country, bringing together today's effort, for that matter, moving the ball along so well. Look, a couple of thoughts. Like many of you, I was a professional soldier, but a constant historian, particularly military history. There's a good argument that World War I, this immense tragedy that ended empires and changed the map, the political and economic map of much of the face of the earth, was one of the most senseless wars that was ever fought, and arguably one of the most consequential in terms of its outcome. Certainly from the viewpoint of the Americans. You know, Rob had me sit in on one of his commission meetings, and the French representative was there. Of course, they fought from 1914 to 18, tremendous national tragedy in both Great Britain and France in particular. They had a €143 million effort the first year to bring attention to the importance of this conflict. And it's global. It's not just on the battlefields of France and Belgium, but it's a global effort. So I think it's really important for all of us to try and use, particularly 2017, 2018, perhaps 2019, to educate, to underscore, to remind Americans of our global impact. And by the way, at the end of the day, you know, the other thing, I just took a wonderful couple-week tour of all the World War I battlefields. It's also important to remind yourself this is at the end of the day about soldiers, Marines, sailors, the beginnings of the Army Air Corps, etc. 2 million of them there. 2 million more were coming. That ended the war. You know, I don't think there's much discussion on that. The Germans said that they essentially knew they'd missed the timing and it ended the war favorably. So I look forward to, Rob, to supporting your work and the commissions. And if I may, let me ask Congressman Ted Poe to come and say a few words. Thanks very much.
Thank you, General. My name is Ted Poe. I'm a member of Congress from Texas, and it's an honor to be here today to discuss the importance of remembering World War I. If you go and pick up textbooks from our schools, you may see a paragraph or two about World War I. 100 years ago. It is important for us that we remember those young men that went home. This photograph over here to my right is a photograph of Frank Buckles Jr. When he was 16, maybe 15, he lied to get into the United States Army. He went straight to Europe. He drove an ambulance and he picked up doughboys that had been killed or wounded on the battlefield of France in Europe and brought them back behind enemy lines. After the war was over with, he came back to the United States, and when World War II started, he found himself in the Philippines. He was captured by the Japanese and held as a prisoner of war for 4 years in the Philippines. After that war was over, he came back to the United States and he farmed the rest of his life. He was the last survivor of World War I. He died at the age of 110. He had been to the Hill before his death, and his purpose in being to the Hill to talk to me and other members of Congress, like Emanuel Cleaver and the senators, was so that his friends that died in World War I, have died since World War I, would not be forgotten, that they would be remembered by America. He did not live to see the day where we had a memorial here in Washington for all of those that lived or served in World War I, those that served and came home, those that served and came home with the wounds of war, and those that served and did not come back home. But we will get that memorial built for those folks that served in World War I. Those men and women in World War I, those were the parents of the greatest generation that served in World War II. And some of them, of course, like my dad, are still alive. America should remember our past and remember the people who created that past and sent us in the direction that we are today. And as the general said, when the Americans entered the war in 1917 and went over to Europe, our allies were stunned and the enemy was shocked with the tenacious attitude of the Americans showing up. And soon thereafter, the war was over and they came home. They came home to an America that had changed, and many of them had contracted Spanish flu while they were there, and thousands of them died when they came home from that disease. So the commission, the goal of the commission is to remember those people, primarily young people, as it always is. They'll go off to battle to represent and fight for America's values. And we will do that. We have that obligation and we have that privilege to make sure that this generation knows who their ancestors were 100 years ago that preserved America, fought for America, fought for the privileges and the values that we still have today. Because as it has been said, the worst casualty of war is to be forgotten. And we will not let that occur. And we will remember and honor those people of the World War I generation. Thank you very much.